Now let's address the Iron Man ideology, neoconservatism. What is the Flower Revolution? The Flower Revolution was the peaceful overthrowing by the military of the dictatorship of Portugal in the 1970s and its replacement with a socialist democratic government. That is to say, with the Socialist Party full of, socialists. They did not turn Portugal into a socialist state. Much like other European democracies, the Socialist Party being in power does not necessarily make it a socialist country, but it was a revolution by socialists against a not military dictatorship. Well, actually, yeah, a military dictatorship that the military and the socialists revolted against, many of whom were in the military, and succeeded without ever firing a single shot. In fact, the reason it's called the Flower Revolution is because a lot of the soldiers, while riding on tanks, would put flowers in the barrels of their guns and tanks. The Flower Revolution, because we love flowers. But now let me talk about neoconservatism. Neoconservatism is neoliberalism, but you're also really racist and homophobic. That's literally it. And you also really like wars abroad. This, in a way, you could tie this to, you could say that this is the most competent the far right could ever be, because neoconservatism, since it's a subset of neoliberalism, is not necessarily subject to the wholesale irrationalism of fascism. Like, they're not completely irrational buffoons, but they are unhinged enough to want mass suffering, basically. If you know about the New American Century, Marco Rubio and a lot of other Republicans in the early 2000s, and still today, advocated for sort of the devolution of conflict. No more large-scale wars like you would see in World War II or Vietnam or Korea, but rather get America involved in, because they're American, get America involved in many low-level military conflicts around the world to justify defense spending. The war is not meant to be won, it is meant to be fought indefinitely. That is one of the most dangerous things about neoconservative ideology. It is effectively the most optimal way to ensure that no money is spent on anything good. And in fact, for that reason, I'm putting it down here because of the kind of suffering that it has wrought. It still has a something of an adherence to liberal democratic institutions at home, and potentially in some way abroad as well. But funnily enough, you could argue that this is in some ways more fascist than modern American fascism, because it is very overtly very overtly about subservience to one state in particular. The primacy of one particular state, the subservience of all other ideological goals to the national interest. Neoconservatives are fucking obsessed with talking about national security. This is a threat to our national security. This should never happen to this great nation. They're obsessed with that. This very closely resembles the nationalist narratives parroted by the fascists of yester-century. The difference being that these guys are only really racist, as opposed to, I'm going to kill millions of people because of their race, racist. They just kill millions of people because they fucking feel like it, and they do so indiscriminately. Which is a much more, not not prejudiced way of doing that. And neoconservatives have also been known to uphold other institutions of the state insofar as they, serve to stabilize that state. There have been neoconservatives in Europe, at the very least, who have erred on the side of protecting some of the social institutions built up by past social democrats so as to not destabilize the national interest. Whereas fascists are incompetent enough that they will get into government and tear everything limb from limb, including the institutions that were propping up the government and its ability to ensure the consent of the governed in the first place. Those are my thoughts on neoconservatism. Pretty cringe. I'm putting it below radical feminism and objectivism because both of these are like kind of joke ideologies, if I'm being honest. So is primitivism, but this is like a little bit more evil. This is like Ted Kaczynski shit. You're getting into like terrorist territory down here. Objectivism and radical feminism are kind of more toothless precisely because of like a lot of rad femmes are either, you know, really jaded feminists, in which case they have no power because feminists have never really had power, unfortunately, in some cases. You know, these movements have not really been successful in taking state power for themselves. Or also because they're like femcells or something like that, in which case they don't have any power, which is for the better. Objectivism is like 14-year-old Reddit libertarianism. That's what this is. Also an ideology that did not enjoy very much power, still doesn't, because like I mentioned, one of the only saving graces of objectivism is its appreciation for like art sometimes and for individual expression as a concept, and the modern sort of anarcho-capitalist, foreshadowing, dickheads like Elon Musk are very anti-art. They are much more closely aligned with fascists in that respect. They do not like, well, freedom. It is a very reactionary vision of freedom, objectivism, but it is a vision of freedom all the same, and it has never enjoyed very much power as a result. Meanwhile, this should be a picture of Javier Milei down here. He is probably the most well-known person to be associated with this ideology. Him and to a degree also Elon Musk, because Elon Musk was very supportive of Argentina's Javier Milei. You're going here because this is ultimately just fascism masquerading as libertarianism. That's all this is. Anarcho-capitalism is, what if we gave unlimited freedoms to the capitalists to exploit the worker, and workers actually get cucked for free? You know, this is the kind of shit that you're like, oh, sweet, 53% poverty rate, my favorite. And also hating minorities. Anarcho-capitalism, much like the mindset that causes a lot of conservatives to really, really want to gut public education. A lot of these people are really just fucking racist. You know? Hello, Editing Y2K here. This is just one part of a multi-part series of me ranking all the ideologies that I know enough about to comment on. It took place over the course of 2 live streams earlier in the year, and the other parts will be all available on a playlist if you're interested. Please check it out, and thank you for watching.